Hello, welcome back. And this is another episode of Stories of the Board. We're gonna do volume 4. And today I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. I actually wanna talk about a different kind of skateboard that I made. One that's a different medium for me, not necessarily just like a straight up Sharpie drawing. Today we're gonna talk about Jumper. This board right here, this was a photograph that I took actually, and this one is really pretty cool because it was I used to take these trips. I worked on a whole series at one point called the Desolation Series, and in that series of artworks, I would go up to like the North Shore of Lake Superior, and it started actually on a trip to Mount Bohemian in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I took a photo of Lake Gokabik, which is this big long lake in the UP in Michigan. And it was this sort of ominous night. The sun was just going down midwinter. It was snowing really hard, and you could just barely see this thin blue strip of shoreline across the lake. So I wandered out a few feet onto the lake and just took this kind of photo with basically 3 hues of blue, and it set this sort of emotion to me that was kind of like this sort of feeling of desolation or whatever, and that's kind of where the whole series started. Was this photo I had taken in Michigan. Needless to say, that led to a whole bunch of work. That summer, I actually went up and camped alone on the North Shore of Lake Superior in Minnesota. I would go up and camp alone for 3-4 days at a time, and I actually really enjoyed the weather up there, like the bad weather. I would go up. I kind of really got lucky the first time I camped in the middle of a thunderstorm for like 3 straight days. And as miserable as it was, it did create some pretty cool sort of ominous photos where the lake was sort of just gone in the background, and it created kind of these images where, if you notice in this board, there's sort of no real background. The lake, if you kind of look closely, the lake just sort of fades away. And obviously this is a kid jumping off a cliff. And so that kind of set the tone for what the whole Desolation series would be. And I did an opening in 2006. I used to have like a studio gallery space here in Minneapolis, and I did an opening for the show, and I produced probably about 10 or 15 different photos that I had selected from that. And then I produced 2 skateboard graphics based on that show, and this was one of them. This one's called Jumper, I believe, pretty generic title. This is actually, the story here is that I was down on the Temperance River. This is the entrance to the Temperance River, right where the Temperance River meets Lake Superior. And I think a lot of people in Minnesota are pretty familiar with this spot. But as I was down on the rocks taking photos of the entrance, trying to get this sort of really cool view where the entrance of the river came out, and it looked like it just went into nothing. It was just desolate out onto the lake. So part of the Desolation series was part of that. It was always kind of these really in-focused foregrounds and then these just lost backgrounds that just sort of disappeared. And so I loved that feeling, and I got a really cool series of photos out of that. But this particular kid was jumping off these cliffs this day, and I got lucky, and I was down on the rocks, right down on the water, and he was about to jump, and I pulled out my camera quickly and snapped this photo and got very lucky, just caught him. I really love his positioning and the height where he's at. And just, the background just being so ominous. I loved it. I just was in love with this photo, and I just felt like it fit a skateboard graphic very, very well. And in fact, the kid swam up to me, and I showed him the photo, and I was like, gave him my email address. I was like, this is sick, dude. I'm going to do something like this with this photo. You should email me and I'll send you a copy or something. And he never did. But if you're watching this, kid, and you remember this picture, it turned out. I think I made 100 of these boards initially, something like that. Might have been, I don't know, I can't remember exactly. But I think we did like 100 and sold them all. This board is actually sold out. There might be one copy available somewhere. So if someone is desperate for it, let me know. Anytime I make a graphic, it's kind of a funny little side story. That probably is backwards on the camera, but I always take the very first one off the press, and then I write "do not sell," first copy, and I keep that for myself. So I have first copies of all of my printed graphics, the ones that are commercial use. So yeah, this was pretty cool. It was about a 30-foot cliff. This kid was jumping. He was brave. It was pretty sick. I definitely had never seen anyone jump off of this particular point. So if you're sitting if you're familiar with the Temperance River, basically, if you're sitting, there's nowhere good to put that down. If you're sitting inside the river looking out at the lake, this would have been the cliff on the right-hand side as you're looking towards the lake, right as the river hits the lake. And the really crazy thing is, I went up there, I probably shot this photo in September maybe, and I went back the next year, and this entire section of the lake right here, where this kid is landing, had filled in with sand. So that section of the river can fluctuate, 15 to 20 feet with the ground and with the swell and the current and all that. So it's really dangerous. So I would recommend, if you ever go up there, don't jump off that cliff. This kid is so lucky that the water was where it was at that day. It changes, weekly. It's really, really crazy. So there are some safe spots on the Temperance, but there's a lot of really bad spots. Super, super careful. I don't want this to feel like an endorsement to go jump off of that particular side, because where he's landing in this photo, the next time I went up there, dry sand, totally dry. Super, super dangerous. So yeah, if you're jumping off cliffs in the Temperance or anywhere around Superior for that matter, be super careful. It's one of my favorite pastimes. I love it. I go up to Lake Superior as often as I possibly can, and I love swimming in the lake and finding little rocks to jump off of and so on. But yeah, this photo, I just absolutely loved it. The Desolation show was probably my most successful actual art show. I think the night of the opening, I sold 75% of the art off the wall, so that was definitely my most successful opening night. And it was a fun show because it was kind of the first time I really honed in on one particular theme. So the whole thing was based on these wilderness, sort of ominous scenes, and I put some writing to it. I made skateboards, I made paintings on top of photos. It was mostly photography based, but it had a little bit of everything, but it was all sort of themed around this ominous giant wilderness type of vibe. And it was one of my favorite projects I've ever done. I absolutely loved doing it, and it made me really appreciate my time kind of solo camping and being on the lake and so on. So North Shore Lake Superior, this is the Temperance River, the entrance. This board's called Jumper. It was done in 2016. So yeah, there you have it, Jumper. Stories of the Board, Volume 4. Take care.